Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
We are most pleased to bring you a two-week series on something that is of great interest to us here at the North Idaho College Public Forum. Throughout America, there's a number of cities and actually counties that are dealing with what we call livable communities or model communities. And in those particular cities and counties, a number of things are being done to make it so much more pleasant and livable. And one of those is dealing with pedestrian-friendly paths so that we can separate the heavy traffic from people being able to walk throughout their community. And so that is going to be our focus for the next 2 weeks. And I'm very pleased to have three guests that are so qualified to address this, and we are going to welcome them to our program. First of all is Mike Gridley. He is the attorney for the city of Coeur d'Alene. And Mike, I want to thank you not only for being here, but helping set up this program and having this idea.
You're welcome.
And next to him is a long community volunteer and dedicated to our communities in North Idaho, and that is Vern Newby. He is the chair of the city of Coeur d'Alene Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. He's also, for 16 years, served on the Coeur d'Alene School District of 271. And thank you for being here and all the service that you give to the communities.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
And our third guest we're very pleased to welcome, that we've known a long time, is Chris Kopstead. He's a former member of the City Council in Coeur d'Alene, and he's now the Executive Director of the North Idaho Centennial Trail Foundation. And Chris, we say to you too, thanks for your many years of service to making our communities a much more livable place.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you again for inviting us.
And we're so pleased to have our regular panelist, who is the Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, Erna Reinhardt, and she will start today's questioning.
Welcome to all three of you. It promises to be a great show. I want to start our questions today with Chris Kopstead. One of the things that so many of the residents of Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai County enjoy is what we call the Centennial Trail, and that was probably one of the very first trails that came to our community. And I want, Chris, you were so involved in getting that off the ground. I would like for you to share with our viewers what the Centennial Trail is and how it came to be.
Okay, well, actually, the Centennial Trail became a subcommittee of the Idaho Centennial Celebration Committee back in the 80s. The actual trail project was put into motion in '87, and the key people at that time was Doug Eastwood, who was and still is our parks director, Bob McDonald, who at that time was a Coeur d'Alene city councilman, and Randy Haddock, a local business person who was a triathlete, and all very, very involved. The first 5 miles of the trail were actually dedicated in October of 1990. The foundation was actually established in 1989 to oversee the trail. The Centennial Trail is comprised of 23 miles of primarily Class 1 and Class 2 trails. And I guess I should digress a little bit and explain what a Class 1 and Class 2. Class 1 trail is paved, totally separated from the traffic and the streets. Class 2 is striped but dedicated to bicycles and pedestrian traffic, and then Class 3 are just dedicated areas for bicycle or pedestrian traffic. And we start at the Idaho-Washington state border at State Line Park, go through the city of Post Falls, connect we cross Celtice Way at Highway 41 and follow the freeway to Northwest Boulevard, where we again cross Celtice Way and go down and connect through the Dyke Road at NIC, and then across City Hall, and then out the parkway to Higgins Point. So we have 23 miles of beautiful, dedicated public right-of-way.
And share with us, Chris, if you're out there on a typical Saturday or Sunday, what would you typically see?
Well, you'd see just about every type of non-motorized user. It's designed for bicycles. It's designed for pedestrians, handicapped. There's skaters, mothers pushing strollers with their babies. All kinds of family activities.
I know I have done some rollerblading on that trail, and my husband has actually used the trail to commute to his job in Spokane, so we are big users of it ourselves. I want to go with Vern. Vern, you are the chair of the Pedestrian and the Bicycle Committee for the City of Coeur d'Alene. Tell us what that is and what is the goal of that group.
Okay, the Coeur d'Alene Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee was developed just a little over a year ago. So we've had, I think we started our first meeting in December in '03. And we've been charged with developing bikeways and pedestrian pathways and identifying projects for the city that particularly the easy to do projects that wouldn't cost much money, that we can get off and running to start with and really make the community a little bit better place to get around town without having to use vehicular traffic. That would be the essence of the committee.
And can you give us an example of maybe what one of the projects is going to be that you're hoping to pursue?
Something that we started on would be the 15th Street project from I-90 north to Best Avenue. In the last summer, the city was able to pave the shoulders on the road. There's more to do on that project. We need to fix the surface in a few places, adjust a curb line, and stripe the road, but it's amazing how many people have started using that as a byway other than driving through it now that there's room for both cars and bicycles, strollers, kids with wagons. Seen lots through there. One of the upcoming projects we're going to be talking about would be the Harrison Street corridor. The bicycle pathways plan has been developed, and we have a technical subcommittee that will be working on adjusting it, but we have a plan for the entire city to link major corridors for bicycle type of use. The Harrison corridor from Government Way to 15th Street is our next project, and we will be presenting to the City Council tomorrow night that particular corridor and ask for approval of bike lanes for that.
Great. And Mike, I want to go to you next real quick. As the liaison for the City of Coeur d'Alene to this committee, how does the city prioritize, or there must be certain areas of a city that you would want to make sure have these kinds of services? And the first thing that comes to my mind is schools. You must want to be able to make sure that young children have a safe venue to get to and from their home and to their school. That's one example. And maybe talk about, as a city planner, what kind of areas do you look for to develop in this way?
Well, that's a great question. The city has adopted a bikeway plan, and they adopted that a number of years ago, and Chris was involved with council at that time. The goal of the plan is to link various places, parts in the community, schools, places where commuters would want to go, KMC, downtown, but also link to the outlying areas. So if you wanted to get from downtown out to Hayden or out to the Prairie going west, there's ways to do that. So they developed a bikeway plan, and part of our mission is to implement that, take it from the paper and put it into actual use pavement. One of the programs that we're really focused on, in fact we've applied for a grant that will help us implement it, is a Safe Routes to Schools program. And the goal, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a little town in Kansas, and I got to ride my bike everywhere and had a great time growing up. And I think a lot of our kids don't have that freedom and that creative time where they can get to and from school. So one of our programs is to identify the routes that will allow kids to ride their bike or walk, skate, whatever, to school, and maybe get some of the moms and dads out of the taxi driver business and give the kids a better experience.
Just a couple of clarifications. I think I'm correct on this. We have viewers, of course, from many states, and our good friends over in Washington. So when you talk about the Centennial Trail, even though your responsibility is in North Idaho, what you described, the Centennial Trail is much longer than that. And it's interstate in that sense, is it not, Chris?
Absolutely. And forgive me for not going into that, because it does extend another 29 miles from the border to the other side of Spokane.
Yeah, so as Erna was saying, you could, here in the central city of Coeur d'Alene, you get on, you can go all the way over into Spokane. And so what I guess I want to do with Mike at this point is to talk about in a rather comprehensive way for our viewers that not only is the city of Coeur d'Alene and some neighboring cities and Spokane, but our friends in Canada and other states. This is the kind of thing that is really catching on, is it not? That, Mike, I'd just like to have you to address the fact that why is it so important for people to have access to their communities other than in a motorized vehicle? Well, and what does it do for the community?
Yeah, I think it changes your community. It allows people to experience some of the things we experience. If when you walk downtown and you see Tony Stewart, a famous person, walking across the street, you can wave and yell, "Hey, Tony," or just say hello on the sidewalk.
I guess you've lost touch with reality on that one.
But it's an experience of a small town that you don't get when you're encased in a car. I think another focus is just the idea that many of us don't get much exercise. One of the I guess triumphs of our culture is that life has gotten easy. We don't have much physical labor, and so, or as much, and so for many of us, we need to get more exercise.
There's a health question involved here too. Before the program started, you talked about some of that. Would you just mention, because people are walking less, exercising less, in the general way, there's a lot of great exercise centers, and a lot of people have become conscious about weekly exercise. But give us some of the problems, the challenges.
It's really an epidemic. A lot of people are now focusing on. Some examples are the level of inactivity is at an all-time high. Obesity is at an all-time high. 65% of adults are considered overweight or obese. Childhood obesity has doubled since 1970. And an interesting statistic, because it gets down to money, and that's what drives a lot of things, is obesity adds $395 per year in health costs, and that's more than smoking or drinking. So when you look at some of these projects, they make sense from a lot of different ways.
And countering that and encouraging people. But time's going so fast, and I want to have some photographs, and if our staff will put those up, and Mike, you can see them on the monitor there. Tell us from these photographs what is needed or what is happening. I know there's the first one.
That's the first one, and you can see there's a large puddle there, and that covers what is supposed to be a bike lane. And so this was one that Vern identified from his, I think, daily commuting. That discourages people from walking or riding. So he got with the county commissioners, I think, and it was a relatively simple problem to fix. But if you're
not friendly for pedestrians.
Right. And so you look at that and you say, well, I won't walk, I'll drive. Yeah.
And Vern, I'll have you to do this next one. This next one come here again. Isn't this a problem, or is that to your right? Is that a walking path?
Okay, to the far right is the sidewalk. You can just barely see it on the right-hand side of the screen. What I was looking at in this picture was the mustard weed that is growing out, or sweet clover, I guess it is that's growing out over where you would try to ride a bicycle if you were trying to stay out of the traffic. So it pushes the cyclist out into the traffic, which is aggravating for both vehicles.
Yeah, and we'll take the third one here. And Chris, maybe you could address this one for us. This is one of the paths that you're talking about. Isn't that correct?
Well,
I don't know where this path is.
Yeah, I might talk about that because that's near and dear to many of your NIC students here at the campus, because that's Northwest Boulevard. That's the south side by the railroad tracks. So if you wanted to come from the campus up Lincoln Way to cross Northwest Boulevard, you get to that point and there's no crossing.
I see. It stops. But this is what Chris was talking about too. There's 3 classifications of paths, and this would be one of those classifications. And then our fourth and final photograph.
That's the other side of the street of Northwest Boulevard from that. So your people, students and employees who live on north side of Northwest Boulevard can't get across Northwest Boulevard. We've created a barrier with that street. Yeah.
Then I'm going to ask the staff that are listening in the studio if they would put up the map that you provide for us, Mike. And from this map, is this the kind of thing you're looking at to determine where it is friendly and where it isn't in relation to your future planning?
Well, and Chris might want to talk about that. That is the location of the newest piece of the Centennial Trail that's going to be
Kristen, why don't you do that for
constructed.
us?
Absolutely. I believe we start probably next month with this weather in construction of the extension of the Centennial Trail through the Stone property. One of our goals has been to get it off of Northwest Boulevard, and John Stone has been a very, very good partner.
And for those who are out of town, that is near the interstate as you're coming in from west to Coeur d'Alene.
Exactly. Yeah, it's when you hit Northwest Boulevard at Celtice Way coming in from Spokane, going down into the city of Coeur d'Alene. We used to go along the very heavily traveled Northwest Boulevard, and this is the first step in getting the pedestrians and bicycles off of that dangerous street and into a safe area. This is going to go, it took us a considerable amount of times negotiating with the railroads, and thanks to the expertise of Mike Gridley, who used to, in his former life, was an attorney for a railroad. And so he helped us get that ability to cross. It was interesting, the costs were so dramatically different. Our only options initially were to either go under or go over, and because they wouldn't allow us to cross at grade. And the cost to make a tunnel under or a bridge over were just absolutely horrendous. So with Mike's intervention, we finally got an at-grade crossing, and we'll be able to expand that this spring.
He also got some tracks removed from downtown Coeur d'Alene where they're developing what's so-called the Four Corners, which is also part of the making a more livable community. I have one more question for Vern, and then I'll go back to Erna Reinhardt. One of the things that's come up, too, that all communities could learn from the projects that you're trying to do, and that is it's so important for children to be safe. An awful lot of children in cities walk to school or ride their bikes to school and all. Could you share with us some of your excitement about how these plans can not only encourage children to get more exercise, but make them more safe to and from school?
Well, let me start off with a challenge that we have, and a very strong challenge for getting kids to school safely would be the Interstate 90 bridge at 15th Street. And it's going to take on added significance in the near future as they develop Cherry Hill Park. So we are looking for ways to route the kids in a safe fashion and also provide access for handicap to get through there, to allow bicycles to get through those constricted areas. We have sent out some surveys to the schools. We're collecting data on hazard spots. Sometimes they're just as simple as a tree root lifted sidewalk. Other places, the biggest problem we have is the parents bringing their kids to school in their vehicles because it's too dangerous for them to come. So it compounds the problem. So if we can, say, eliminate half of the parents from dropping their kids off for school, it's going to be more healthy for their child, and it's also going to alleviate a lot of the congestion at the schools.
So it has all possible.
Could I give you an example? Sandpoint also has an active pedestrian committee. The woman that runs that committee, I was visiting with her, and they sponsored a walk to school day in October. It's a national event. They did that, and they were concerned because of the heavy traffic on one street that they were going to have to cross with all these children walking to school. So they made plans for crosswalk guards and all this. And they got there that morning. They had like 1,500 children citywide, but a lot of people walking. They got there, and guess what? There was no traffic. And they realized that the traffic that they'd been dealing with and worried about was everybody, one student per car, driving to school. You eliminate that, and it's
eliminates
ironic.
some pollution, eliminates some cost and energy, and there's all kinds of benefits.
Well, it's called the multiplier effect.
Yeah.
We don't want our children to walk to school because there's too much traffic, so we drive them, and so does everyone else. So it just compounds, like Vern said.
Erna Reinhardt.
I want to ask each of you this question, so I'll start with Chris. If there are communities out there that would like to start something like this, that don't already have something like this in place, who are some of the players that need to be at that table to have that conversation, to make this move forward? And maybe speak about, use Coeur d'Alene as an example, but in any community in our viewership, who are some of the players that need to be at the table to make this work?
Well, obviously government officials, but government officials that are actually interested in safe pedestrian and bicycle pathways, and then the users, a representation of all aspects of the users, and that's what comprises our committee. We have handicapped, senior citizens, bicyclists, walkers, joggers, engineers, architects, etc.
Excellent. Mike, would you add anything to that? Or maybe take it another step in terms of what are some of the issues that need to be discussed?
I think it's important to look at it as broad as possible, like Chris was saying, get everybody involved. If it's viewed as just a bunch of bikers, people riding bicycles, well, that leaves out a lot of people. But you get into these issues and look at it, it involves senior citizens. I mean, curb cuts that allow people to roll up on ramps aren't just for handicapped people. They're for elderly people. It's easier for them. A lot of it is just getting people to start thinking differently about things. For example, some of the sidewalks in Coeur d'Alene that we've been looking at are in terrible shape. They've been that way for a number of years. We would never allow a street to go for a day in that condition, and yet we allow a sidewalk to go for years. And so looking at our sidewalks, our paths as infrastructure that we value, that we recognize link communities together, or neighborhoods together, and so we put money to spend it. So broadening the base, getting people interested, and then there are a lot of state and federal emphasis grants, so it takes a partnership. But yeah, a lot of good resources out there.
Vern, anything to add?
Certainly. One of the groups that's often left out of the mix until it's realized later is the businesses and the convention business or bureau. And for Coeur d'Alene, we specifically have going on for the next 3 more years the Ironman competition. If Coeur d'Alene develops its bikeways plans even to the minimal extent that we're proposing right now, it will enhance the participation of those riders before and after the rides. Sometimes they'll come up for vacations and so forth. And those are the type of people that are riding around downtown or walking around downtown. And when you're at a pedestrian's pace and you see something that snags your eye, then you're going to turn into that store and you're going to take a closer look, if not do a purchase there. So there is an economic benefit for helping out the non-vehicular traffic.
And Mike, that's a really good point, and I was going to bring that up, but you've already taken care of it. Also, as Chris had talked about, government's involved if it's successful. And so would you share with us some of the experience that, again, I agree with Reinhardt, one of our responsibilities here is to talk about how other communities could do the same thing. Mm-hmm. There's an ordinance, and isn't that necessary in the process?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. We got the ordinance, set up a committee. So council decided to set up a committee. Now, we are great thieves at the city, and with the internet, you can go on, and there are many cities that have pedestrian bicycle advisory committees, pedbike committees. And so we were able to go, and we stole some from Bend, Oregon, and Ashland, Oregon, and places in Massachusetts, and places that have already looked at these issues and decided this is a good thing and we want to support it. So we adopted an ordinance, set out what our responsibilities would be, who the members would be. Again, we thought it was important to have a broad base in the membership. We have a council member, Deanna Goodlanders, on our committee and was very supportive. I think that's so important because, again, if it's viewed as just benefiting one small segment of the community, then it's hard to support. But if you recognize everybody benefits, you get a lot out of it.
Is it also helpful in something that's very important in local government is comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances. Right. So does that also find its way into those plans to enhance the possibility of having, like, in our community here, we have a great large park, and we have what we call neighborhood pocket parks. Now, that came out of a futurism study we did some years ago that people asked. So for those who are looking at this, should they also look at their ordinances in relation to zoning and comprehensive plans in trying to make a community more friendly and livable?
Right, and that's a good point, Tony, because you can take your comprehensive plan or some of these master plans, and in there, in almost all of them, there is language that support. They talk about supporting alternative transportation and supporting connection of neighborhoods. So you take that and you take it to your elected officials and say, you've already said that this is important, now we want to take it a step further. And a lot of times that gets dropped off on the wayside, but that's one way to approach it that is very effective, I think.
Chris?
I think that's why a committee such as this is so important to a bikeways or a pedestrian plan too, is because we're here to oversee and see to it that it's followed. I sat on the planning commission for 9 years prior to becoming a councilman, and quite honestly, it was never the bike plan that was in existence. Shame on me, I never realized there was a bike plan in existence, and so we didn't utilize that. Now it's an appendix. It's an appendix of the comprehensive plan, and we're here to see to it that yes, it is utilized and it is followed with the new developments.
On that note, we're close to having the program at the end. The clock has run for 33 years here, but Chris will pick up next time because all of you will be back next week, and we're very appreciative of that. And we want to talk about the future and some of the things that you have in mind. We've been talking most on this program about what you've done up to this point and identifying some of the challenges you've had. But as we do that next week, I also want our viewers to know that we're going to take again, as we've done in the present, about the future, how other communities could maybe work with you and how they could cooperate in tourism and in some ways. And I'd like, Chris, if you talk about Seattle and a visit you had there recently, and how sharing like this causes all communities to be much more livable. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have our guests back next week to continue to talk about what is so important to every community, and that is to make it a maximum place of contentment and enjoyment. And we hope you'll be with us again at that time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.